When we begin to treat Ayurvedically, when we treat someone for an imbalance in their health, what we're treating is we really believe that Ayurveda, and we know that Ayurveda as a science believes that our health is intimately connected to nature. It's connected to the rhythms and the cycles of the world at large. Like increases like, and opposites decrease. So what we take in can increase qualities that we see in our body. So has anyone recently been feeling a little hot? Little heated? Anybody recently been feeling maybe a little irritable? A little road ragey, maybe? Even though you meditate and find, yes. Has anyone had any rashes come up in the last couple of weeks? Yeah. Any breakouts? Any pimples? For women, if you're noticing a heavier cycle or a heavier flow in the last month, that may have come up. So all of these are indicative that there might be a slight imbalance in your body. And so the three doshas, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. So Vata is it's made of the qualities and the elements of air and space. And so it's responsible for movement, both in our body and in the universe. So all movement. You can think of it in our bodies in terms of all the processes like respiration and elimination and even somewhat circulation. So anywhere there's movement in the body, Vata is helping that process. In the world at large, you might think of it in terms of whether it's the movements of the heavens, whether it's the movement of wind. You can imagine it in terms of how does air move and what does it move through? It moves through space. So those are qualities of Vata. So if you think about those qualities, what are the qualities of wind we would think of? Well, it could be cooling. It could be drying, very moving. That moving can cause a roughness as the dryness increases. It's light. Wind and air are very light. They don't have physical form. It's subtle. You can't necessarily see it, but it's there. We can experience it. We experience wind and air. We experience air and space, but we can't see it. It's unstable and it's mobile. So those qualities we can notice as the seasons go as well. So if we think in terms of Pitta, Pitta is made up of fire and water. And so those qualities in the body are responsible for transformation. So we might think in the body specifically about digestion, metabolism, even cell digestion, even cell metabolism, and also our gross digestion. What's happening in our gut? Pitta is responsible for that, or rather those qualities of fire and water are responsible for that. So in the environment, all transformation. We might see right now we're in the harvest time. This is actually where everything's harvested. It's a time of great transformation. And so you might notice that Pitta, those qualities are starting, they're becoming more prevalent. And so those qualities would include liquid, penetrating, hot, and heat producing. It's light, it's mobile, and it's fluid. So we'll get back to Pitta. It's happening a lot right now. And then lastly, we have Kapha. Kapha is made up of water and earth. And it is ultimately, water and earth, they're very dense. They're responsible for stability. So we want good Kapha in our world. That's how this whole material plane exists, is by that stability in the body, in the environment. So its qualities are to be heavy, it's cold, it's soft, it's oily, it's sweet, and it's stable, and it's sticky. It's those qualities that are nourishing and building. So when you think in terms of like increasing like, all of those qualities I just named, if we add more of those qualities in the food that we eat, in the experiences we have, even in the seasons that we go through, we're adding elements of that. Those qualities are being added, and so they're going to show up in our body as well. So where we'll see that right now, where we're particularly concerned right now, is in the season that we're in now, which is called Sharad Ritu. And that's autumn. So let's see. So what causes the seasons? Anybody know what causes the seasons? We know that seasons have an effect and that they happen, but we may not give too much thought to what actually causes them. So what causes the seasons is actually the movement of the Earth in its tilt and its orbit. So as the Earth is moving around the sun, it's doing this, and it's changing how it's going around the sun, and we're being affected by that. And so the ancient Vedic people really understood their astronomy and really understood the role of that in seasonal displacement and the role of how that sun and lack of sun and moon, sun and less sun, greater, longer days and longer nights, depending on where the Earth was in this axis. So they split the year up in two general terms. One is Uttarayana and one is Dakshinaya. And so Uttarayana is that cycle of the year, which is the northward movement of the sun. So that's perceiving the sun moving northward. And that is associated with as the days are getting longer. So what time is that? That's the beginning of the year. So it's from winter into spring into summer. And so if the days are getting longer, we're having more, or appearing to get longer, and appearing to have more contact with the sun. So we can imagine some qualities. What are the qualities of the sun? The sun is heating. It's light. It's increasing those qualities of heat. So we see a general increase in heat. Slowly increasing in heat. And then we enter this Dakshinaya phase as we move away from. And so that's that southward movement of the sun. And that comes from sort of midsummer through autumn and then early winter. So we are in that section of the year. We're in that Dakshinaya section. And so what's happening now is the nights are getting longer. So we're getting a little relief from all of that sun. And so slowly we're getting a little more coolness. But don't forget, we've just had a long period of building up of heat. So building up of that heat. And we may be starting to feel that buildup in our bodies. And that's when we start noticing that Pitta may be increasing. So we would say in the summer, we had heat. We know it gets hot in the summer. Maybe it doesn't feel like it around here necessarily, but we're also experiencing the qualities of having those longer days. And you can see it whether we have fog or not. Even here, we see it in the qualities of the plants around us. We see how dry they're getting, how dry they've been. The fields, you can see in the fields all around here, you see how it's getting kind of gold and brown. There's not too much moisture there, right? So as that heat has increased, so is the dryness. So as we're moving, it's kind of complex, but as we're moving into this state where those nights are getting longer, we're slowly starting to increase coolness and wetness and moisture in the body. That heat, which rose in the body during the summer, but we didn't necessarily feel because it was still pretty dry. We weren't necessarily having like a spreading Pitta-like quality, that Pitta coming up and that Pitta symptoms of how that heat spreads through our body. Well, now we're starting, maybe, if you've already been accumulating it may be showing up in your body. And you may be experiencing the heat of the summer that was accumulating actually in your body now in fall. So that means we have to be really aware of how to calm that and pacify that so that we're not yelling at our family and the people on the streets, so we're not breaking out in rashes and having hives and allergies and all of these things, which I myself have also been increasing. So a lot of what we'll be talking about today is dealing with that heat, that accumulated heat. or what I'll be talking about. And then as we pacify that increase in Pitta dosha in our bodies in this season, then we start to be able to enter into winter with less accumulated Pitta and a calmer, more balanced state so that we can really take advantage of that nourishing time of winter, which Puja will be describing more of. So we talked about some of the symptoms that you might be experiencing. Outbreaks of rashes, hive, herpes, fever, blisters. If you've been having any mouth sores, this would be a common time that it would be experienced. For children, often chickenpox and measles come out in the fall. We'll start to notice more symptoms of that. All of these things are, all of this pitta dosha as it's increasing can start to affect the tissues of our body. And so that's why we want to calm it down, because the first thing that it will affect is what's called our rakta dhatu. And so that's actually our blood, so that sensation of our heated blood. And that's where we start noticing it where it comes out in the skin, where it comes out in our mind, where it comes out in our that's part of the irritability as well. So if anyone's been having aggravated symptoms, then do take notes. These are some great notes right now for what you can do to pacify Pitta. Generally, if you were here at the last Sangha, you learned that has everyone heard of agni? Do you know what agni is? Agni is your digestive capacity. So it's your digestion, it's your metabolism, it's how well you it's that process by which you're able to actually digest the food you get. So we want a strong agni. We want an agni that can actually digest everything we're putting into it. And sometimes it's stronger or weaker. And so in the summer, it's at its weakest point of the year. And we're starting now, as we're moving towards winter, it's starting to get stronger. So that digestive capacity is getting stronger, but it's still not fully top form. By the time you get to winter, you'll really have, hopefully, you'll really have a strong digestion. And you see this in the kinds of foods we eat. We get more hunger. We want to have richer foods. A lot of the holiday foods around the world are really dense, nourishing, rich food because you can actually digest it. So, but we're not there yet. So we want to be able to cool ourselves and soothe that pitta, but not overwhelm our digestive capacity. So to do that, what can you imagine that might be sweet, cooling, juicy, light, and nourishing? Fruit! Yay! Fruit. This is a great season to eat fruit in. And often fruit is often considered Ayurvedically a little too cooling to eat in a lot of times of the year, because it can be a little too wet and a little too cool for some people to digest. So we're always very happy when the season comes around if you're a pitta and you say, if you're pitta dominant and you have pitta issues. I enjoy being able to eat my sweet fruits. You don't necessarily want sour fruits. This isn't necessarily a great time to have orange juice, a lot of citrus fruits, because they're sour in taste. So does anyone know what the 6 tastes are? Are you familiar with the shadrasas? The 6 tastes are how we actually work with our body to treat these doshas. So tastes that will increase pitta are things that are salty. That's a big one. So that'll increase that fire in your mouth and in your body. Things that are sour and things that are pungent, like chilies and garlic and onions. So those are things that are actually increasing pitta. So right now, we don't really want to be eating a lot of things that are sour and salty and pungent. Other things that are sour are not just things that we think of as being sour to the taste, like maybe oranges or other citrus fruit, but it's also things that are fermented. So has anyone ever noticed that if they eat sour bread, they maybe get a little heartburn? Has anybody experienced that? or an increase in acidity in their body. Same if you're drinking alcohol. If you've noticed that maybe your stomach doesn't feel so great either as you're eating it or the next day. Things that are fermented increase sour in the body, and so they're going to increase pitta, so they're going to increase some of those symptoms. So right now, especially, is the time that we want to avoid those tastes. So the tastes that we want to increase in our diets right now are foods that are sweet, that are bitter, and that are astringent. So we want to calm that pitta down. So what do we want to eat? We want to eat moderate qualities or quantities of nourishing but pitta-pacifying foods. So these are going to include sweet fruits, grapes, pomegranate, coconut, rose. Rose is a wonderful thing. And you can check out the videos on YouTube because we have a lot of recipes and things. There's a whole series that Pragya just put up from the last Sangha that talks about some specific recipes and qualities of foods and pranayama and which is breathing techniques that you can use. So do refer back to that. Rice, ghee, milk, wheat, barley, and mung. Those are all good foods to eat right now. Turmeric, fenugreek, cumin, coriander, and cardamom are all good spices. So if you're wondering where your flavor is going to come from, don't worry. There's plenty of things that will give you flavor that are not chilies, onions, and garlic. You want to avoid things which increase the heat and the wet in the body. So that would include the alcohol, exposure to sun. This isn't a great time to go hang out in the sun for many hours at a time. You're going to notice an aggravation of those symptoms, especially if you're suffering from any skin conditions. This is not the time to go. I know with San Francisco, it's like this is the one time a year you actually get to see sun, but keep it down as far as hours. Use rose water spray, so cooling, so lovely. Coconut is great right now. Coconut oil is good. You want to avoid a lot of excess oil. Again, it's kind of heavy, hard to digest. That's not going to help your symptoms at all. So you want to eat a good quantity that you can actually digest in any given moment. So that sort of addresses what foods to eat. But there's more to this than just food, right? We talked about how do we work with the mind, not just the body, the physical body, but we also want to work with the mind and the soul. So, so what can we do when we're out of balance? When we feel like we're out of balance? If we have that extra heat, not just in our skin, but also in our thoughts and our emotions, if we're finding ourselves really reactive, that irritability, that heatedness we were talking about. How do we cool the mind and soothe ourselves in other ways? And so there's an entire field of treatment in Ayurveda called Devya Vyapashre Chikitsa, which is spiritual therapy. And so we would work with the individual, and we can work with ourselves. We should always treat ourselves as scientists. So when you start noticing these symptoms in your own body, this is your time to say, I'm practicing mindfulness and I'm going to do something about it. I don't normally yell at the top of my lungs at someone. I don't normally get very reactive, but now I am. So maybe my pitta is increased, maybe my rajus and my tamas are increased. So to get to what we were talking about, the gunas, someone mentioned they weren't familiar with that term. So in addition to the doshas, which we use to treat the mind, we also work with what are called gunas, or qualities of the mind. And so we have 3 gunas. We have rajas, we have tamas, and we have sattva. So sattva is our natural balance. So that's we all have it. Don't worry, you can all get back to that. At one point in your life, no matter what, you've had a moment of peace and balance. And you've had that clarity, and that's because that's your essential nature. That's who you are. We just have to uncover it and get back to it. But you may have noticed that you're experiencing maybe a little bit more agitation, a little bit more reaction. Maybe you're finding yourself with an increase in, sort of the push and pull dynamic, the wanting, rajas, which is that quality, is associated with being kind of that more reactiveness of the mind, so more prone to defending oneself, more prone to engaging in battles of strength and will with each other. Or maybe you're experiencing more tamas. Maybe you just want to hide, you want to cover up, you want to be a slug on the couch, and you want to just be in your lethargy. Or you're very depressed, which is a whole lot of tamas. So what we want to do is if we start noticing these qualities, we start to also treat that. And so we can, like increases like, and opposites decrease. So some ways that we can actually treat that increase in rajas and tamas is to start doing things which help us to increase our sattva. And so in this season especially, I personally find it's even more beneficial to me as a Pitta dominant Prakriti in my Pitta Kal, which is my Pitta time of life, in a Pitta increasing season like fall. This is a time when I can only speak for myself, when I find it very beneficial to do things like meditate, to do things like waking up early, spending time with myself, taking a break from Facebook. That was my sadhana for a festival we're experiencing right now called Navratri, which Lakshmi was talking about. So in the fall, you'll notice in the Vedic ritual season, we start doing things that are that help to also heal the body as well as the mind. So many of the festivals now come with food choices which are calming the pitta, and then that are soothing to the mind. And so. So right now we're going through Navratri, which is the 9 nights, and those of us who are following this are also following it Ayurvedically. So we are not eating meat, we're not drinking alcohol, we're not even eating grains right now. We're having things like a lot of milk and ghee and butter, squashes, sweet squashes, pumpkins, potatoes, many root vegetables that are actually very nourishing. But it's also kind of a fasting that we're doing. So we're eating sweet, calming, nourishing foods, but not in large quantities. So this is a good time of the year, and this starts it. And Pragya will be teaching you all a recipe, which is both supportive for Navratri and also is something you can then again eat in the winter months as well. So let's see. All right. So we're 10 minutes out. I'm going to have to get to the moon stuff right now. All right. Okay, so what do we want to do to increase our mental health and our physical well-being? We want to eat small amounts of food and do activities which are sattva evoking, that are moon blessed, that are pitta balancing, and that are emotion calming. And so I mentioned meditating, waking up early. The quality of the moon is something that we can use also to treat ourselves. So just as we're treating ourselves with this food, we can also treat ourselves with moon-like qualities. And what are the moon qualities? It's cooling, it's nourishing, it's sweet, it induces that calmness of the mind. Being out under the moon, under the full moon, is a very soothing and calming experience for the mind. It actually does build sattva in the mind, so it helps you to increase those qualities in your mind and to calm all of that accumulation of sun energy. And so with it being both soothing and liquid and calming and unctuous and nourishing, all of this is considered samyutta. And so it's all those moon qualities will help us. So how do we take advantage of that? How do we actually get the moon in us? That's a trick. So one thing we can do is we can create what's called hamsodak. And hamsodak water is something that it's water that you've taken and you've boiled it during the day. You put it in a pitcher, put it in a glass pitcher, cover it with muslin or cheesecloth. put it out during the whole sun, leave it in the sun all day, and then allow it to stay in the moon all night. And then that water you can drink, you drink that water, and it's very cooling. So you've actually taken in those same qualities of the moon. And you'll find that it's actually cooling. You'll actually physically notice it's cooling to the body, but light and digestive. But it's because you've already boiled it, so you've added some lightness to it. And then you've let it soak up the moon. But it's also very beneficial for the mind and the thought patterns. So do try it and then report back in January. I want to hear if anyone did it and noticed a benefit from it. We also practice in Sharad Ritu. We also observe Sharad Purnima, and that's this full moon coming up. And so the full moon for Sharad Ritu is actually, this new one is going to be on the evening of between October 7th and 8th. So the very fullest part of the moon is very early in the morning on October 8th. However, this is a very unusual full moon in that we also have a total eclipse. So normally I would be telling you to spend all night sleeping under the moon and taking up all of its qualities. But because we have an eclipse, what's an eclipse? It's where we've covered the lightness. What's a covering? Tamas, yeah. So that increase of tamas energy. And we don't really want to increase tamas. We want to increase sattva and reduce tamas. So, but we still want to take advantage of that Sharad Ritu and that Sharad Purnima. So I'm going to tell you a little ritual to do. And then instead of sleeping all night under the moon, which you might do in another, maybe next year, it won't be an eclipse, but instead go out, be by the light of this moon, and then come back in and light your ghee candle and go to sleep in your house, all safe and snuggled up. So, has anyone ever spent the night out in this moon or the harvest moon? Have you noticed how bright and how long that night is? You can actually, I've actually read and written in it. You know, it's like a light is shining down on you. So it was understood that you can this is the time to soak up as much of that soothing, cool energy as you can. And it was said that if you could take advantage of this moon and be out in it, then it would help to pacify your pitta for the rest of the fall season. So this is good. This is good, strong medicine. Go do it. So that moon is visible nearly from sundown to sunup. So it's really amazing. So it's very magic. So if you want to do a moon ritual and you want to take full advantage of this energy and you really want to calm and pacify your mind and calm and pacify your pitta and be soothing and sweet and unctuous and cool and lovely, then prepare for it. So the day before, don't eat, please, for yourselves, don't eat meat, don't drink alcohol, avoid chilies and spices, eat soothing, cool foods like kheer. There's a recipe, I think, on our website, I think there's a video with Sanjay Ji teaching kheer. And you can eat rice and milk and soothing sweet food, small amounts of it. And you can go out and make a mandala or a rangoli. It's a beautiful design you can make using wheat flour and all things white. So you want to be wearing white. You go out under the moon. Find even some sidewalk is good for this. And you take the wheat flour and you can do an om. Do you all know how to do an om? I'll draw one if you don't. So make an om and you can surround it with concentric circles or squares with the wheat flour and then decorate it to your heart's content with tea lights and white flowers and any offerings if you wanted to do crystals or anything like that. And this is a great time to be in quiet silence with your partners and your family under the moon and in a circle around it. And then you can meditate. If you know Gayatri, that's a beautiful mantra to say right now. And there's also many moon mantras if you're familiar with if you're familiar with them. And there's one quick mantra that I can tell you that will be good. And so repeat after me. Om. Om Chandraye Namaha. Om Chandraye Namaha. I bow to you, Brahman, as appearing as moon in my universe. As you're saying it, a good way to connect with it is to keep your eyes closed. Repeat it 9, 27, 108 times, whichever you feel comfortable and appropriate with, and keep your attention on your agni, on your third eye, and connect and feel that moon, and feel it cooling you down and soothing you and calming you in this time. Thank you. May you all be nice and cool and soothed in this fall season. Jai Ma.